You didn't just watch a WNBA playoff game. You witnessed a battle for control, of image, of power, of personality. 1 second, Indiana Fever were celebrating a win. The next, Sophie Cunningham was locked in a stare-down with league security, and the footage spread like wildfire. But this wasn't just some spicy courtside drama or a rogue hothead losing her cool. No, this moment, it was a quiet rebellion. Let's rewind.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The Fever had just taken down the Atlanta Dream in what should have been a celebratory, high-energy night for women's basketball. The playoff atmosphere was electric, the stakes were high, and players were giving everything. But while the headlines should have been about elite performance, all anyone could talk about was what happened off the court. And who it happened to? Sophie Cunningham. The name alone has always sparked conversation. She's the player who doesn't fit neatly into the WNBA's shiny PR box. Outspoken, scrappy, unfiltered. She's not just playing the game, she's pushing its boundaries. And people either love her or, well, you saw it. Now, let's set the scene. Cunningham was sidelined with an injury, meaning she wasn't even suited up to play. She was doing what any teammate would, showing up, supporting her squad, being present. Nothing wild, nothing aggressive. But after the final buzzer, she became the target of something truly bizarre. A female league security officer, aka the so-called WNBA police, locked eyes with Sophie and just wouldn't break contact. Not for seconds, for minutes. A full-blown stare-down. For what? Breathing too confidently? Existing while opinionated? And Sophie? She gave that energy right back. Calm, cold, defiant. She didn't say a word. She didn't raise her voice. But her body language was screaming. It was the kind of look that could shatter glass. The type of nonverbal, try me, you only deliver when you've been underestimated for way too long. And the internet heard it loud and clear. By the time the clip hit social media, fans were already in formation. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, it was a digital tidal wave. The reaction was instantaneous. People weren't just watching it. They were dissecting it. The slow pan of the camera, the icy glare, the sheer absurdity of a security officer on camera, visibly provoking a non-playing, injured athlete. And then Sophie spoke. In her post-game comments, she didn't throw punches. She didn't even need to. Her words were cool, but cutting. She called it out for what it was, an unnecessary, embarrassing overstep by league security and a glaring reminder of how differently players like her are treated. And here's the kicker. She's absolutely right. Because this wasn't an isolated moment. This was just the latest chapter in a pattern the league doesn't want to acknowledge. A pattern of silencing, side-eyeing, and sidelining players who don't play into the WNBA's polished, sponsor-friendly narrative. And the fans? They're getting tired of it. Let's be honest, this league has always walked a tightrope, trying to build mainstream appeal while still staying authentic. But that balancing act is cracking. And Sophie's stare-down was like someone throwing a brick right through it. Because here's the thing, we've seen this kind of treatment before. Players who are too bold, too emotional, too loud for the league's carefully curated brand, they're handled, not celebrated, not protected, managed. Meanwhile, others, often with cleaner reputations or more marketable personas, are coddled, promoted, and defended even when things get messy. That's not shade. That's just the system. And Sophie's moment didn't just bring this into the light. It blasted it onto the Jumbotron. Fans were quick to point out the hypocrisy. If this had been, say, Caitlin Clark, or even Angel Reese, would it have played out the same way? Would security have stepped in for a staring contest? Would the narrative have shifted so quickly into questions about professionalism or behavior? Or would it have been branded a passionate moment? A competitive edge? A misunderstanding? You already know the answer. What this incident really exposed is that the WNBA still doesn't quite know what to do with players who refuse to conform. Players who don't shrink themselves to fit the mold. Sophie isn't trying to be your PR darling. She's not filtering her personality for likes. And that, apparently, makes her a threat. The fact that she had to defend herself publicly after being stared down by security, not an opposing player, is just wild. The optics were horrible. But what's worse is that the league didn't seem to grasp just how bad it looked. Where was the league statement supporting their player? Where was the acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, intimidating an injured athlete in front of cameras wasn't the best move? Crickets. Instead, it fell on Sophie, again, to carry the weight. And she did, with a confidence that makes her haters foam at the mouth, and a grace that the league couldn't buy with all the sponsorship money in the world. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to post a Finsta rant. All she did was stare back, speak her truth, and let the rest of us do the talking. And talk we did. Fans aren't just mad. They're activated. They're connecting the dots. This wasn't about one player and one security guard. This was about how the league treats authenticity like it's a PR problem. About how it punishes players who don't play nice. About how it prioritizes image over integrity every single time. Sponsors are watching. Media's watching. And the fans? They've got receipts now. Because in trying to silence Sophie Cunningham, the league accidentally gave her a megaphone. She's become a symbol of resistance, of realness, of every player who's been told to tone it down, play nice, and fall in line. Her stare down wasn't just a moment. It was a message. You can't control me. And I'm not going anywhere. And that glare? It's going to haunt WNBA execs for a long time. You'd think a league trying to grow its fan base would love a player like Sophie. She's fiery. She's fearless. She's got that tell-it-like-it-is energy that fans live for. But instead, the league treats her and others like her like liabilities. It's short-sighted. It's petty. And it's not working anymore. Because fans want real. They want messy, passionate, unscripted moments. They want players who feel like people, not press releases. And Sophie? She's as real as it gets. So here we are. What started as a playoff when turned into a PR nightmare. Not for Sophie, but for the WNBA. And unless something changes, this won't be the last time fans call it out. Because if you can't handle players who bring heat, don't be surprised when they burn down your facade. And if you really want to grow the game, start by respecting the people who make it worth watching. Give Sophie Cunningham her flowers. Not because she stared down security like a boss, but because she stood her ground when the league tried to shrink her. And you better believe fans are watching every move from here on out. So what do you think? Was Sophie out of line, or was this just another example of the league missing the bigger picture? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this convo is just getting started. And if you're here for the drama, the meltdowns, and the moments that make sports actually exciting, hit that subscribe button. There's always more chaos coming. You'd think after all this time, the WNBA would know how to read the room. But instead, they pulled the most classic move in the playbook of corporate overreach. Treat emotion like misconduct. Because heaven forbid a player shows attitude, especially when she's injured, not even on the floor, and simply existing a little too unapologetically for someone's comfort. But let's talk about what that stare really meant. That was more than just Sophie Cunningham holding her ground. That was years of quiet condescension, of side eyes, of subtle stay in your lane, messages, all boiling up and being delivered through a single, icy glare. No yelling, no gestures, no physical threat, just presence. And that's what rattled people. Because nothing's more intimidating than someone who refuses to be embarrassed. Someone who isn't scared of consequences, because they know they are the story. And this woman wasn't some rookie trying to make a name for herself with theatrics. Sophie is a vet. She's put in the work. She's taken the hits, physically, professionally, reputationally. And instead of fading into the background or rebranding herself into something more digestible, she doubled down on who she is. And that is what made this so powerful. Let's be clear, the stare down wasn't about ego. It was about drawing a line in the sand. You can't keep asking players to be ambassadors, warriors, entertainers, role models, and then turn around and treat them like they're disposable the second they don't match the league's aesthetic. That's not leadership. That's control disguised as professionalism. And the fans? We're not falling for it anymore. Because here's the unspoken part of the controversy. Sophie's not the first, and she won't be the last. This kind of tension has been simmering in the WNBA for years. The league wants growth, but only on their terms. They want passion, but only if it's palatable. They want star power, but only if it doesn't challenge the status quo. Sophie? She doesn't fit in that box. Neither does Caitlin Clark, by the way, or Angel Reese, or Skylar Diggins-Smith. There's a growing list of players who have been told in 1,000 subtle ways. Tone it down. Be easier to manage. Stop being a problem. But what the league doesn't understand is that these problems are actually its assets. Players like Sophie are the reason people care. Not because they're perfect, because they're human. Flawed, fiery, interesting. The kind of players who make people pick sides. The kind who turn games into events. And instead of embracing that, the league keeps fumbling the bag. Let's talk brass tacks. Sophie Cunningham is marketable. Not in the manufactured, social media managed way, but in the authentic, messy, unpredictable way that actually sells tickets. And what happened in that Staredown? It was a viral marketing dream. If only the league had the sense to see it. But instead, they treated it like damage control. A moment to suppress, to brush off, to pretend never happened. That's the difference between growth and gatekeeping. Because if the NBA had a player do this, that stare would be on t-shirts by now. It'd be meme-ified, branded, turned into an entire campaign. The look, unbothered energy. There'd be a Nike commercial already in post-production. But here, silence. Which begs the question, why? Why is the WNBA so terrified of giving its players real narrative space? Why are the stars expected to be quiet, polished, and grateful at all times? Why is passion policed more than progress? You can't build a league on buzz and then sweat it away when it comes from the wrong personality. And make no mistake, this wasn't about security protocol. If anyone actually believed Sophie Cunningham posed a threat, we'd have seen a very different kind of response. This was targeted, personal, calculated. A message sent through intimidation. We see you, and we don't like your vibe. And Sophie's response? Message received, and returned, unopened, with a death glare. You'd think that'd be the end of it, right? One weird stare down, some post-game quotes, a few spicy tweets. But oh no, the story ballooned. Because it wasn't just fans reacting. Players were talking. Quietly, publicly, indirectly, but the energy shifted. You could feel it. The unspoken tension around favoritism. Around selective promotion. Around the way the league leans into certain stories and shies away from others. People started noticing the imbalance. Why some players are handed endorsement deals and media profiles, while others with equal, if not greater impact, are ignored. Why some athletes are protected and others are pushed into damage control mode the second they show an edge. And the biggest irony? Sophie didn't even do anything. She didn't instigate. She didn't throw hands. She literally just stood there, minding her business, and responded to being confronted. And somehow she became the headline. It says a lot about how the league perceives power. Who's allowed to hold it? Who's expected to relinquish it? And what happens when someone doesn't play the game the right way? But if the WNBA thought this would pass quietly, they miscalculated. Because instead of being silenced, Sophie became a symbol of resistance, of authenticity, of what happens when a player refuses to shrink herself to fit a script. She's not trying to be palatable. She's trying to be real. And honestly, that's what this league needs. Desperately. Because the WNBA isn't struggling for talent, or storylines, or viral moments. It's struggling with how to handle them. And until leadership stops treating authenticity like a liability, they're going to keep stepping on their own potential. So now the ball's in their court. Do they double down on silence? Do they pretend the stare down never happened? Or do they actually, finally, listen to what fans and players have been saying for years? That this league has a culture problem, a branding problem, a leadership problem. Because let's face it, Sophie Cunningham isn't the issue. The issue is a system that punishes fire, filters personality, and rewards submission. The issue is security getting involved with a player who is injured, non-confrontational, and simply unapologetic. The issue is the league's reflex to protect the institution before the individual. And that's what fans are sick of. This isn't 2005. You can't just control the narrative through a press release and hope it dies in the news cycle. Fans are invested. They see the double standards. They see the politics, and they're not going to shut up about it. So what now? Well, if the WNBA's smart, they'll shift. They'll reassess who's really bad for business and who's actually carrying the brand on their back. They'll realize that stars like Sophie aren't distractions. They're drivers of culture, buzz, and future revenue. And if they're not smart, well, more stares are coming. And not just from Sophie. Because players are tired. Fans are louder than ever. And the next time the league tries to quietly suppress a moment, it might not be just a stare down. It might be a walkout. In the end, this wasn't about a playoff win or a viral clip. It was about power, about control, about who gets to show up fully, and who's expected to dim their light. And Sophie Cunningham? She's not dimming anything. She's standing there, stare sharp as ever, saying everything without saying a word. You felt it. We all did. Now let's see what the league does next. Sophie Cunningham didn't just break the fourth wall of the league's sanitized brand. She stomped on it. With one stare, she said everything fans have been screaming into the void for years. And it's not just about favoritism. It's not just about inconsistency. It's about the weird tension in the WNBA, this feeling that the league wants to grow, but only on its own tightly controlled terms. Like it's afraid of the very thing that could actually make it explode: personality. Chaos. Edges that don't get smoothed down in press briefings. Sophie is that edge, and the league has no idea how to hold her. Instead of using her energy to fuel the movement, they try to contain it. And what we saw in that viral moment, that was the containment cracking. Because when security steps in to confront a player for literally existing while expressive, that's not professionalism. That's projection. That's fear. That's someone trying to protect a brand from the very players who built it. And here's the gag. If you're afraid of letting players be fully themselves, you don't deserve them. Let's really unpack this dynamic, because it's more layered than people want to admit. The WNBA is pushing for mainstream growth, yes. Visibility, money, legitimacy, check, check, check. But growth means risk. And risk means relinquishing some control. But what happens when the people in charge want the buzz without the fire? What happens when they say we want drama, but actually mean only the kind we can script? That's how you get players like Sophie Cunningham, walking contradictions to the brand's comfort zone, suddenly becoming league liabilities in the eyes of corporate. But to fans, she's gold. She's the player who's not afraid to be messy in a post-game interview, who claps back without a filter, who makes you feel something every time she steps onto the court, even when she's not on the court. You can't buy that kind of authenticity. You can't coach it, edit it, or soften it without killing it. And the fact that the WNBA keeps trying, it's not just frustrating. It's bad business. Now let's talk optics. Picture it. You got a post-playoff scene, cameras rolling, crowd roaring, everyone buzzing. And in the middle of that electric moment, a female security officer from the league decides now is the time to walk up and stare down an injured, seated player like she's about to storm Area 51. What was the thought process there? Was the end goal? Intimidation? Correction? A little PR lesson via death glare? Because it sure wasn't about safety. This wasn't about crowd control. This wasn't even about Sophie being out of line. It was about sending a message. You may be a name, but we're still in charge here. Except no, you're not. Not anymore. Because fans saw it. And fans are louder than ever. This isn't the 2010s. You can't tuck something like that under a post-game highlight reel and expect people to move on. You can't handle outspoken women like it's a classroom and you're confiscating someone's phone. That energy? That's over. And yet, somehow leadership still doesn't get it. They're treating bold, unfiltered players like a PR fire to be managed instead of signal flare for how much potential this league actually has. Let me say it straight. If your growth strategy doesn't include players like Sophie Cunningham, you don't have a growth strategy. You have a control strategy. And spoiler, control doesn't trend. Let's zoom out. This incident didn't happen in a vacuum. This is pattern behavior. And people are waking up to it. You got fans pointing out how some players are given endless benefit of the doubt, while others get slapped with fines, vague rule violations, or subtle smear campaigns. You got whispers about how certain storylines get pushed to the front page, while others disappear into the void of league discretion. And it's always the same kind of player who gets punished. The passionate ones. The unapologetic ones. The ones who don't smile through disrespect. The ones who say, "This is my league too." Which brings us back to Sophie. Because whether you're a fan, a critic, or somewhere in between, you've got to admit, she moved the conversation. All from one stare. She made people question the system, the enforcement, the media spin. She made people wonder why being unfiltered is treated like a scandal instead of an asset. And she reminded us all that silence doesn't equal submission. You know who doesn't get stared down by league security? Players who conform. Players who stay quiet. Players who keep their heat on the court and their personalities on mute. But you also know what those players don't get? Viral. Because that Sophie moment? It was raw, uncomfortable, a little absurd, and completely unforgettable. That's how legends are built. Not through perfection, through presence. And the WNBA's biggest challenge right now isn't competition or ratings. It's the disconnect between what the league thinks fans want and what they actually show up for. We don't want perfect. We want passion. We want unfiltered quotes, sideline spats, over-the-top reactions, and locker room vulnerability. We want personality. We want flaws. We want a league that reflects the reality of modern sports culture, not a polished PR brochure with an Instagram filter slapped on top. And that's the real kicker here. Sophie's moment wasn't bad for business. It was the business. That viral stare down? It was more effective than any ad campaign the league could have dreamed up. It sparked engagement. It generated discourse. It pulled in eyeballs that might not have been watching before. And yet, instead of embracing it, the league backed away like it had just seen a ghost. When, in fact, it had just seen the future. Because if the WNBA doesn't start protecting and promoting the realest players in the league, flaws, fire, and all, then someone else will. Another league. Another media platform. Another spotlight. The opportunities are there. The fans are there. The only thing missing? Courage. So here's a radical idea. What if the league stopped trying to muzzle its stars and started letting them lead? What if they trusted the fire instead of fearing it? What if, instead of punishing players like Sophie Cunningham for having presence, they gave them a platform? Because at this point, the league has two choices. 1. Keep controlling the narrative and watch players walk. 2. Embrace the chaos and own the future. Because here's the thing the league doesn't seem to understand. Sophie Cunningham isn't going anywhere. She's not going to tone it down. She's not going to shrink herself. She's not going to play nice just to make executives feel comfortable. She's going to keep showing up loud, injured, fierce, and unbothered. And if that scares the league more than it excites them, that's on them. So the next time someone from the WNBA stares down a player like she's the problem, just know she's probably the solution. And if you're still with me, still fired up, still watching this all unfold like a live drama you can't pause, hit that subscribe. Drop a comment. Tell us where you stand. Is the league suppressing its stars? Is Sophie the hero or the villain in this showdown? Because one thing's for sure, the stare down wasn't the end. It was just the opening scene.